This video is another problem solving based video. This time I'll cover data handling. So in older papers, data handling and experimental design do kind of overlap quite a lot, and you'll find that even in the newer papers. You'll still have to use some of the skills that would apply to problem solving ones that cover experimental design as well. It's just that these ones won't tend to talk so much about variables and things. They'll just talk about looking at an experiment and pulling data from it, drawing conclusions and suggesting things. Okay, so this is the first one I'm going to do, which is the 2017 paper, and it's question 7 from that. So again, same as we always do, we have to highlight the key important parts. So this one is about hormone replacement therapy, which is given to women to kind of relieve symptoms in the menopause and to make them feel a bit better around about that time in their life. So it occurs around about the age of 50 onwards. So this study was carried out into the effects of HRT in the health of 12,000 women. They were separated into 3 equal groups according to their age, and then half of each group took a daily HRT tablet, while the other half received a placebo. Okay, so half of the tablet, half of the placebo. Over 5 years, so it's quite a long study, the number of women in each group who developed either a pulmonary embolism or coronary heart disease was recorded, and then they give the results in the table. Okay, so note that they're comparing the incidence of pulmonary embolism and coronary heart disease, then comparing it across year groups, and they're comparing the difference between HRT and then not being given HRT but being given placebo. Okay, so this first question asks you to describe 2 trends shown by the results for pulmonary embolism alone. So you're not talking about the coronary heart disease, so it would only be this information for this one that you'd be looking at. So there are 2 differences between these groups, okay, 2 different factors that they're really investigating are different between it. So there's age, and there's also either being given the HRT or the placebo. So if we look at age first, ignoring the HRT and the placebo and just looking at age. As age increases, the number of cases of pulmonary embolism increases regardless of whether they have HRT or whether they have placebo. So I'll just maybe simplify that. So number of cases increases with age. Okay, so if I don't look at age, and we've basically made a summary of what trend would show for that. So now if we look at the difference between HRT and placebo. So if you look at the number of cases in HRT, it's always higher than the number of cases in the placebo. So that number of cases then, and again you're always talking about number of cases, okay, because this is the value that they talk about here. So a number of cases is higher in women given HRT, and you shouldn't just stop there, okay? It's a comparative part, okay? So you can't just say they're higher in women that have been given HRT. You'd have to compare that to the placebo. Okay, so you'd have to say some kind of comparative statement to those given placebo. All right, next question is, it was concluded that taking HRT has no effect on the risk of coronary heart disease. Okay, so explain why the results of this study support this conclusion. So if we're looking at coronary heart disease now, so generally, if you look at the results of this study and you say, for example, compare them to the HRT one for pulmonary embolism, the difference between the HRT and placebo is quite significant, it's quite large. But for this, the difference between the numbers is actually quite small. Okay, so you'd say something on the lines of difference in cases between HRT and placebo is small. Okay, or you could say something on the lines of there's a small number of cases compared to that large sample size, so you've only got something like 20 or 18 compared to 12,000 women, for example. Okay, or combining these totals, it's still a fairly small number compared to that large sample size. but generally what you're looking to do is compare them. Okay, so between those two groups, the differences between them is pretty small. Right, part C, suggest, is again an A-style question that we talked about in the experimental design. So suggest is going to be tough. Now it might not seem tough for this, but in a lot of these questions it can be. So suggested factor other than HRT, so not the HRT that they've been given, which could have influenced the results of this study. So basically what you've got to think about is what kind of things could affect their risk of pulmonary embolism or coronary heart disease. So all these things are related to cardiovascular disease. So you've got to link this experiment and this study to what you know from Unit 2 and what factors would affect those things. Okay, what factors would affect and increase your risk of having CVD. Okay, so you can have anything from difference in diet between the one, difference in smoking, degree of exercise, cholesterol level, for example, blood pressure. There are so many things you can list. Genes can play a part. Their weight can play a part. So their obesity level, for example. So we could say obesity there too. Alcohol consumption, because that can cause damage to blood vessels. The fact they might have diabetes. Or they might be on medication, which increases their risk. So there are a huge range of factors that could then increase their risk of having either of these conditions, other than the HRT that they're given. So there might be other reasons why those rates are higher. Okay, so the next question is over the page. So this is describe how the researchers attempted to make sure that the results of this study were reliable. Reliability often is to do with repetition. But when it comes to an study like this, it's all about numbers. So if we go back to this blurb at the start, the numbers they had in this study were massive. They were 12,000, that's really high. So they have a large sample size. Okay, you can also say that there's 12,000 women, for example, which implies a large sample size. Or you can say that there are large groups, if you don't talk about the whole sample, but you talk about groups instead. Or you can say groups of 4,000 women. Anything that implies a large number. Okay, the next one about data handling is this graph of results. So HRT can be prescribed to treat osteoporosis, which is a condition that increases the risk of bones thinning and breaking, particularly that affects women. And it shows bone mass of women changing with age. So this question asks to use data from the graph. Okay, so this is another describing question using the information they've given you. So for this, you need the trend, you need the values, and you need units. Okay, and it's asking you for between the ages, describe the changes that occur in average bone mass between the ages of 10 and 80. Okay, so this here is 10, this is 80, and you need to describe the trend that occurs over this, including values. Okay, so you want to talk about your x-axis first, so you want to say as age increases. And you'd have to state from something. So from this first point, that would be from 10 years. Okay, then you would look to see where it peaks, which is this point. So this would be 35 years. Okay, so as age increases from 10 to 35 years, now you talk about your y-axis, average bone mass. Okay, increased from about 50 in this here to 100% of maximum. Okay, because this is what their value is. That's their units. Okay, now that's us talked about from here to here. Right, now we need to continue on that trend. So as age increased to 80, so further to 80, average bone mass, if we look at this graph, it decreased to this percentage here, which is 46%. Okay, so we've got our trend, we've got increases, and then increases, decreases. So we've got our trend for a mark, and we have our values here, 10 to 35, and then to 80. And then our other values, 46, and then 50 to 100%. Units are percentage of maximum, and then units are years. So we have all the points ticked off. Okay, the next question, I'm going to rub out these lines just to make this a bit clearer for you to see. The next question is state the number of years the average bone mass of women is at least 80% of the maximum. So in this you need to utilise the graph. I need to find where it meets 80. It's got to be at least 80. Okay, so this is first where it meets 80, which is around about, I would say, 18 years. And this is next where it meets it, which is about 55 years. Okay, so the gap between these two is 37 years. Now, in the marking instructions, they've accepted 38 as well. Okay, but either one of those would be acceptable as long as it is the time that it'd be above 80. Okay, and that finishes off 2017 question 7.